Hey guys, it's Haley. Welcome back to my channel. Today I have a super spooky video for you guys. This is one of the particular subjects within the horror realm that truly freaks me out. I'm filming this at night, so I'm a little bit freaked out myself, but I think it's gonna make for a really fun video. You guys have been liking the scary story videos, so I am keeping them coming for you guys. Of course, this time around, do the same. Let me know in the comments what your opinion is on this video, and if you enjoyed these stories, if there's some stories from one of the past videos that you prefer, all that good stuff. You guys know the drill. So today we are going to be talking about something called black-eyed children or black-eyed kids, and the acronym for it is B.E.K. Obviously it stands for black-eyed kids, and if you are unfamiliar with what exactly this phenomenon is, I will read a description. This is off of Wikipedia. It says, black-eyed children or black-eyed kids are an urban legend of supposed paranormal creatures that resemble children between the ages of 6 and 16 with pale skin and black eyes, who are repeatedly seen hitchhiking or panhandling, or are encountered on doorsteps of residential homes. Tales of black-eyed children have appeared in pop culture since the late 1990s. So a little bit more about it is they're supposed to be like spirits or aliens, ghosts. Some think they're demonic, some think they're just ghosts that are lost or spirits that are lost. Basically, when you see them, they're like out and about. They're never like in a car or in someone's house or like with a group of regular kids. They're always kind of like by themselves, maybe a group of a couple of them, only with like their own kind, and then they're apparently always asking to enter your premises, whether it's your house, your car, and you're never supposed to let them in. And at the end I have kind of a little bonus story for you guys. When I was looking up an actual description of black-eyed children, I came up with this really scary little, I guess, mini story about someone who said they did let one of them inside of their home, which you are not supposed to do. Some people think this is an urban legend. Of course, urban legends, a lot of people think are true, so you can decide what you believe, but if you ever do want to research, it's super fascinating, really scary, but check online. There's a lot of stories of people who say that they have encountered these kids before. So what do you believe? Let's read some stories and see if this helps you decide on whether you think they're real or not. So these are supposedly two true stories, of course. This first story is called Midnight Caller. It almost felt like a dream. I woke up to my dog, Lucy, barking. She was upright on the bed where my husband and I were sleeping with our 22-month-old daughter, staring at our door like an unknown stranger was out there rummaging around. I thought she was just freaking out over a house noise. We'd only had her for 3 months and she was still a puppy. It could have been anything. Our roommate, a creak from the house settling, the awnings moving outside in the breeze. I wasn't too concerned initially. I decided the best bet would be to open the door and show her nothing was there. It sounds a bit silly, but it's what we do with our daughter when she gets scared, and I figured it would work with our puppy too. I opened the door and she raced to the front door. She stood there, snarling at the door. It was an angry, violent growl, one I had never heard her make before. I looked groggily at her and opened the baby gate blocking the doorway, planning to open the door and show her that everything was okay. The second my hand reached for the deadbolt, Lucy went wild. She started barking and jumped toward me, and when I touched the metal, she suddenly changed her temper. She whimpered, almost like she was afraid and backing down. As her mannerism changed, so did mine. I wasn't calm anymore. My heart was racing and sinking at the same time. I had been flooded with a mixture of fear and dread. I looked through the peephole. I can't explain why I looked, but I did. Outside were 2 kids. One was just a smidgen shorter than me and didn't look much younger. I'm 21 and she looked to be 16 or 17. She was slender and pale. Her hair was a light shade of honey blonde and she wore it long, about mid-back, with long, thin, blunt bangs in the front that covered most of her eyes. She wore jeans, a light wash that's popular right now, and a thin-looking olive-colored pullover-style hoodie. She held the hand of a small girl who looked to be about 3 or 4, in the same style jeans and a button-down ivory cardigan. The smaller one looked at the floor shyly, but had the same shade of hair, tied back in a ponytail. She held a stuffed toy under her free arm, and it was identical to one my daughter has, as was their style of dress. Had it not been for the feeling of overwhelming dread and fear, I probably would have asked these children in and given them some tea or hot chocolate to get them out of the bitter cold. But something about them seemed off. At this point, I hadn't made any noise. I hadn't shushed the dog or grumbled nothing. I hadn't turned on any lights. These kids had no indicators I was at the door. But the older one spoke. She had a voice that was mature, confident, strong, and accentless. She held her head tilted downward, and I couldn't see her eyes. She said, "We have to use your phone." I stood frozen in fear. How did she know I was there? She raised her head to face me directly, and that was when I saw her eyes. There was a reason I couldn't see them through her bangs before. They were black, otherworldly. She said, "Our mother is worried." As someone who has always been interested in creepy stories, I knew what she was the second she looked at me through the door. I have never been one to believe in these things. As a staunch atheist and skeptic when it comes to the paranormal, I had written off many a ghost story from friends and family members eager to tell their tales. I never believed it. Still, I couldn't rationalize my way out of this. I was standing with nothing but a thin wooden door between me and a black-eyed child. There was no questioning what was right in front of my face. I did not answer her. Slowly and silently, I backed away from the door, Lucy still cowering at my ankles. She kept talking. "Just let us in to use your phone." I took another step back, and with that step the tone changed. At first the girl seemed polite. When I took that second step back, she became commanding, almost hostile. "We're not going to hurt you. If we wanted to do that, we would have broken in. I'll ask again. May we come in and use your phone?" Lucy snarled at the door, and I inched backward, though something inside me seemed to be slowly pulling me back toward the door. It wasn't a physical pulling so much as a subconscious need to go back and let them in. I got to my room, covered up the window, locked the door, and sat there in the dim light of nightlight. I heard her call me back to the door once more, and then quiet. I didn't go back to sleep that night, and I haven't slept right since. I know from reading about them that b.e.k.s can't just come in without permission. I know they haven't hurt anyone, but I still fear I'll be the exception. When I told my husband, he said it was just a dream. He keeps telling me to forget it, but this lingering feeling of sadness, this dread when the house is silent at night, this fear of a knock at the door, this tells me otherwise. This next story is called Trick or Treat. This really freaked me out. Yesterday I noticed my neighbor hadn't put out all of his Halloween decorations, lights, etc. The past 2 years I've lived next to him, he's gone all out for Halloween. I don't know him well, he's younger, single, but I know he likes kids, but not in a creepy way. His brother and sister-in-law and their kids are always visiting him, and he plays with his 3 young nieces and nephews out in the front yard. So anyways, I got home from work and was walking up my driveway, and I saw him outside and said something like, "Hey man, you better get your Halloween stuff up or that house up the street is gonna beat you for best decorations." He kind of smiles sheepishly and says that he's actually going to keep his house dark this year and just put candy out. I asked if he was going out of town, but he said no. Something happened last year that really scared him. I was concerned for my own safety if some weirdos were coming around our neighborhood, which it's a pretty safe neighborhood with tons of young families living here. So I asked him what happened. He said last year he had his brother's family over so they could trick or treat in the neighborhood, since they live in an apartment complex that doesn't do much for Halloween. He had a bunch of kids come to the door, like always. His family took off around 10:30, and there were only a few older trick-or-treaters, but by 11:30 they were pretty much done. So he went inside, watched TV, and the doorbell rings. He grabs the candy bowl and heads over, noticing that it's a little past midnight and That's pretty rude for trick-or-treaters to still be out, but then he notices he hasn't turned off all of his decoration lights yet, so his house is of course still a beacon. He swings the door open and is about to yell boo or something to freak the kids out, but stops dead when his eyes meet them. He said one was probably around 13 or 14 and the other probably 16 or 17. Both were boys. They weren't dressed up, but he remembers the older one was wearing a flannel checkered shirt. He was immediately overcome with uneasiness, like opening the door was a huge mistake. They just stared at him, and he noticed they had really big irises and dilated pupils. He couldn't even see the whites of their eyes. He figured they were contact lenses, but he was frozen there, holding the candy bowl, like he couldn't slam the door in their face as much as he wanted to. So he nervously tried to smile at them, hoping they would break character and ask for candy or something. The younger one told him that they had gotten lost and needed to come in and use his phone. That was when he closed the door more than halfway on them and said, "No, sorry." And the older one said something along the lines of, "Can we just wait in your house until our parents come get us?" But by then, he was convinced that his life was in danger and these kids must be high on something or intending to rob him, and he just kept mumbling, "No, sorry, good night," as he inched the door closed and finally locked it. He told me he was so freaking scared at that point that they were going to try to break in through one of the windows or something, but he looked through the peephole and they were turned to leave. He watched TV with the volume really low so he could hear any sounds at all, and he said he stayed up until like 5 a.m. because he was too scared to go to bed and drop his guard. The whole time he's telling me this, I'm thinking, oh my god, this sounds so familiar, just like the Black-Eyed Kids urban legend. Then I thought, hey, maybe this dude is just trying to scare me because, after all, he does have the Halloween spirit. I'm looking at him incredulously, but trying not to seem too gullible. So I'm like, man, that is some really crazy stuff. Sounds like Black-Eyed Kids. He just looks at me blankly. The what? Is that a movie or something? I told him no, but said to go look it up online. An hour later, I get a knock on my door, and admittedly, almost jump out of my skin thinking it's one of those demonic children. It was my neighbor, and his eyes were freaking huge. He swears to me up and down that he has never heard of the b.e.k.s before, and it's so similar to what happened to him. So we talked a while longer, and I told him that quite a few people probably know about that urban legend, and it's possible it was just teenagers with black sclera lenses trying to freak people out on Halloween, which would be pretty genius, by the way. But he said the fear was so primal and came over him the second he opened the door. To this day, we still really don't know whether it was kids messing around or if it really was the infamous black-eyed children. Alright, you guys, and a quick third story. This one is called Every Story I've Read About Them is from someone who already knew about them. Last night was like any other night. I was switching between listening to music and watching YouTube videos with one headphone in so I could hear my infant daughter if she cries. That way my wife can get a full night's sleep. She works at 4 a.m. at the hospital every day. When I decided to go lay down in the spare bed in the baby's room, just as I dozed off, I heard a thumping coming from the front porch. Startled at first, I opened my eyes wide and scanned the room. Realizing it was most likely my cat scratching himself on the front porch, I dozed back off again. But then, the thumping came back. "Damn cat," I whispered under my breath. I got out of bed to run him off the porch, only to find that he wasn't even there anymore. Now that I was up again, I wasn't the least bit tired. I figured I'd just get some tea and check Facebook while I was up, maybe finish the web series I was watching on YouTube. A few minutes into the video, I felt the sudden urge to look up at the kitchen window. And there they were. The tops of two short-statured people, their heads cresting the stairs just above my window frame. They were just short enough to not see into the window, but I could see out. I heard no footsteps on my porch as my stomach turned, but The knock. The knock was a steady, hollow thump. The very same thump I had just blamed on my cat. Deciding it was best not to answer, I shut my laptop and crept by the door back to the baby's room. I assumed it was some of the people from the low-income housing across the road from me that were high, or maybe hiding from the cops, or maybe looking for my cousin who stays with me often and has many friends over there. The last thing I needed was to try to explain to two stoners that I was trying to sleep even though it was 2 a.m. It wasn't until I got to my daughter's room that the creepiness set in. The thump had moved from the kitchen to the bedroom windows, both windows, a room apart, thumping, perfectly in sync. These stoners were going to wake up my daughter if I didn't run them off now. Pissed off, I went out to the kitchen, unlocked and opened the door, ready to run around the side of the house and kick some little idiot's ass. It happened then, standing there looking up at me, were 2 10 or 11-year-old boys. That's when the feeling of dread and the smell of mold almost made me vomit. The smaller of the two then spoke. May we use your telegraph? Huh? I just stared blankly at these boys, horrified of what I had realized. Their eyes were pitch black. He then asked me again to use my telegraph. There wasn't a sound to be heard. No crickets chirping, no dogs barking, no cars driving by, nothing. I tried to play it cool and ignore the fact that he didn't say telephone or phone or cell phone, anything that would have made any sense of the situation, and I calmly replied, "I don't have any service at my house, sorry." The expression on their face turned to rage as I finished my sentence. Swiftly, I shut the door and locked it as quickly as I could, then stumbled back to protect my daughter, my first instinct. I picked her up from her crib and held her close. The fact that she hadn't woken up freaked me out the most, but I managed to gather my senses enough to make sure she was still breathing and warm. Everything with her was okay, it seemed. But the thumping on the windows was back. I dropped to the floor, as close to the wall as I could, and held my little girl in my arms and wept like a child. I felt completely hopeless and afraid. I lied there for what seemed like hours and hours, crying and shaking, until I heard it, my wife's alarm clock. The thumping stopped the instant the alarm went off, and I crept back into the master bedroom with a baby still in my arms. "What's wrong with you?" my wife asked. "I just had a bad dream," is all I could respond. "Okay, well, give me the baby so I can feed her before work." I handed my wife the baby, and she fed her like any normal day. I turned on every single light in the house and then made coffee for her. For some reason, just having her awake calmed my nerves enough to pretend like nothing had happened. I walked her out to the car nervously with the baby in my arms. I asked her not to leave until I walked back into the house. She was put off by the request, but did so to humor me. Once I was safely in the house, I locked the door again, and in the house I sat, horrified, until she got home way later that day. I insisted we go to the next town over and stay the weekend at my brother's house. She reluctantly agreed. And now, here I sit, horrified, while she sleeps in the guest room with my daughter, wondering why they stopped when the alarm went off. I think I know the answer. I was aware of the black-eyed kids, but she wasn't. And every story I've read about them is from someone who already knew about who and what they are. Maybe, just maybe, knowledge of them existing is really the only reason they would come and visit you. And I'm really afraid. I'm also really sorry, because now you know. Alright, you guys, so that was the 2 stories and 3rd bonus story for today's episode of Scary Storytelling. I hope you guys enjoyed these stories and were completely creeped out. A little bit of information I forgot to add at the beginning of the video was that I wanted to mention when people see these children, Usually only one of them speaks. They're usually in clothes from like a different decade. They're never in modern clothes. Typically people see them in clothes from like the 30s and 40s or the 50s and 60s, something that is very like aged and very obviously so not something they went and picked up from like Forever 21 or Target. You know what I mean? It's always something that looks like it's from a different era. You're not supposed to ever let them in. I know I mentioned that. And apparently anyone that's ever let them in has not lived to tell the tale of what happens. Again, this is like a folklore, so who knows if it's true or not, but when I was researching for the actual definition, I found a really cool story. This is called I Let the Black-Eyed Children Into My Home and Now I'm Slowly Dying. So I'm going to save that story for next time, the next episode, so make sure to stay tuned until that next episode comes, because I think that story is going to be really juicy, scary, and really interesting. So that'll be a lot of fun to film. I hope you guys did enjoy this video. I hope it scared you, and if you guys have any of your own scary stories, I would absolutely love if you sent me an email. All this information will be in the down bar, but send me an email with your scary story. I would absolutely love to read it so that people are able to hear it. If it's a true scary story, if you want to like write one, if you've had one in your head for a long time and you know, you want to finally write it down, I would love to read it. That would be so cool. But in the meantime, let me know your thoughts in the comments. If you did enjoy this video, make sure to leave me a thumbs up, only if you liked it. And if you would like to and you enjoy the content on my channel, I would absolutely love if you subscribed. Thank you guys so much for watching, for all your love and your constant support. It means so much to me. You guys are the best, and I hope to see you very soon. Can't wait to read that next B.E.K. scary story for y'all next time. That'll be a lot of fun. But until then, I'll see y'all later. I love you guys. Bye.